So a while back I created a video on footstep sounds on the landscape, and I got a comment about challenging me to create the same mechanic for the automatic landscape material, and instantly I realized, well, that actually the tutorial wasn't that good because it didn't cover that topic, because, well, automatic landscape materials are a big thing. So today we're going to cover that as well. So I have a default third-person template with some footstep sounds in here. I have grass, concrete, and wood sounds, and I'm going to be layer blending between these. So let's set up a landscape material. So I'm going to call this landscape. Let's open this one up, and inside of here, well, I'm going to have 3 textures. So technically you should be able to then add even more. I think 3 is going to be enough for the tutorial. So I'm going to hold T and click 3 times to get the 3 texture sample nodes, and I'm going to have the steepest one is going to be the wood texture for me. Then in between, I'm going to have a concrete, and the last one at the very top of the mountain, it's going to be grass, like so. Now we need to blend these all together somehow, and for that I'm going to be using a lerp. So I'm going to hold L on the keyboard and click twice to get 2 of these. Now the top one's output can go into the base color for now, and the bottom one's output can go into the B route. Now the steepest texture, RGB of it, will go in the top lerps A, and the rest of these 2 will go into the A and B routes of the bottom lerp, like so. Now we need to set up some kind of rules which would actually decide where the blending at which heights should occur. So for that, I'm going to right click and look for world aligned blend, and I'm going to need 2 of these, like so. I'll bring these back a bit maybe. And so both of these nodes have a alpha output, and, well, obviously that's going to go into the lerps alpha, like so. And the same for this one as well, like so. Now we need to set up some values in here, but editing these and experimenting with these in the landscape material itself is going to be a bit long because of the compiling times. So I'm going to set up some scalars. So I'm going to hold S key and click twice to create 2 of these, and one of them is going to go into the blend sharpness, and the other one is going to be the blend bias. Now let's rename these to, so let's call this top sharpness, and the other one is going to be top bias, and we need the same thing for the bottom as well. So again, hold S and create 2 parameters, sharpness and bias, and so it's going to be the bottom sharpness and the bottom bias, like so. There we go. And that's going to be it for now. Let's now create a material instance where we can actually experiment with these values and get the desired result, and then we will populate these values inside of these by default. So back in our content browser, I'm going to right click on the landscape material and create a material instance out of this. Let's open this up and let's enable these parameters so that we can edit these. So here is our material, and I'm going to start off with the top ones. So I'm going to add some sharpness to this, and I'm going to make this very sharp. I'm going to make this like 50, so it's very, very sharp. In the actual project, I suggest making this a little lower so that it blends together a little bit nicer. As you can see, the lower we make this, the better it blends. But I'm going to have mine very sharp, so it's a little bit easier to test this and show in the tutorial. Now for the top bias, I actually want to bring this up a bit, like so, so that the very steep parts are all wood, and that then we have a little bit of concrete. So maybe like, yeah, -20 seems to be good. And then we need the top part for the grass. So again, I'm going to change the sharpness. Now let's set this up again to like 50, so it's very sharp. Now let's bring the bias down a bit, a little too much. So maybe something like -24, -23. There we go. Something like this seems to be good enough. So this is what it's going to look like for me. There we go. So let's get these values inside of here. So we have our top sharpness. So sharpness is both at 50, top bias -20, and then we have the bottom sharpness again 50, and bottom bias at -23. There we go. So now both of these should look identical. Good. Now we also want to add so that we can actually manually paint these as well. So we have that option as well, aside from the automatic material itself. And for that, we're going to look for a node called layer blend, which should be at the very top. Landscape layer blend, like so. Now for this, we're going to add 4 entries inside of the array. And let's open these up and let's give these some names. So we're going to have our auto material, and then we're going to have a wood, we're going to have concrete, and we're going to have grass. There we go. Now we can plug in our lerp into the auto, and then the output goes into the base color. And now we can also provide the manually painted textures, which are going to be these ones right here. So I'm just going to copy these, paste these in, and plug them in. So this was the wood, this was the concrete, and this was the grass. Like so. And there we go. Our material is finished. Now obviously you can go way more in depth with this, and so it looks just a tiny bit better. We'll make the roughness of 1 and specular of 0, so it's not shiny. And that's it. So we're going to save this. Now that we have done this, we can actually go ahead and apply this to our world. So we're going to go to the modes, select the landscape, and create ourselves a landscape. Like so. Now by default it's going to be all black in a second once it's done compiling, and that is because we need to assign the layer blend info. So we're going to go to the paint section, and here we have our layers. And I think I have this from the testing, so let me real quick delete this because I was testing this beforehand. And what you want to do is go ahead and create these weight paint blending layers. So we're going to click this plus sign, and we're going to click weight blended layer. And I'm going to save this where it is by default. Obviously you can save it wherever you like, and we need to do the same thing for all of our layers so that we can actually paint these like so. Now the next thing, real quick, I'm just going to sculpt out a small hill over here. So we're going to have a hill like so, and we're going to go ahead and smoothen this thing out a bit, something like this, so that we have our concrete. And then I'm going to go ahead and flatten this piece. My blending layer skills are awesome. My landscaping is amazing. There we go. Okay, so as long as we have all those textures so that we can test them, it's going to be all good. Now by default this thing is very steep and we can't really walk on top of it, so I actually did some adjustments in my character. So you can open up your character for the testing and click on the character movement and change the walkable floor angle. Now by default this is 44.7. I just bumped this up to 90 so I can literally walk on walls, and therefore it's going to be easier for me to then test this area right here. Good. So far so good. Now let's assign some physics materials to this whole thing. So we actually need to set up some physics surfaces. So we're going to go to the settings, and under the project settings we can look for a physics section, and if we scroll down a bit we're going to have our physical surfaces, and let's provide those. So we have the auto one for the auto material, then we have our grass, concrete, and the wood. Now order of these doesn't matter at all, and so we are good with this one. Now we also need to create the physics materials for this one as well. So I'm going to right click in the content browser and go to the physics, and here we have a physical material. We're going to select this one, so that's the parent one, select, and we're going to call this PM physics material auto. Then I'm going to click Ctrl W to duplicate this and call this PM wood. We're going to have concrete, and we're going to have grass. Now we're going to open up all of these because now we need to assign the actual surface that we provided in the project settings. So select one of yours. So I'm selecting the PM Auto, and at the bottom we can select the surface type now. So this is the auto one. Save that, close it. Concrete, concrete, save that, close it. Grass, grass, wood, wood. Good. So far so good. And now, since we painted these, we actually need to provide that information about which surface type it is inside of their layer blend info. So I'm going to click on this magnifying glass to open up our landscape layers. And we're going to again open up all of these and now provide our physics materials. So here we have the auto one. So we want to select our PM Auto, save that and close it. For the concrete, we want to do concrete. For the grass, we want to do grass. And the wood is wood. Good. Okay, now the last step is to now actually go ahead and play the sounds. And for that, I'm actually gonna look for my animation blueprint. So I have my mesh and I have its animation blueprint. So we're going to need that one, and also we're going to need the animations which are actually going to play the sound. So like walking, running, jumping, basically whenever your character touches the ground. So I'm going to do this just for the running, but you can apply the same exact logic for all of the other animations that you might have. So I'm going to click in the timeline multiple times or hit space to freeze it, and I'm going to look for the first location where the character's feet touch the ground. So this is one of them. So I'm going to right click in the notifies track, and I'm going to add a notify, new notify, and I'm going to call this footstep. Then I'm going to move forward and look for the other leg. There it hits the ground. Right click again, add notify. This time let's go to the skeleton notifies because we already created one and I want to reuse it. So now it's going to fire this code that we are about to create whenever the feet touch the ground. And now you can go and apply this to the other animations as well. Now back in our animation blueprint, we can actually start doing some calculations on which sounds to play. So we can right click and do event footstep, event anim notify footstep. And whenever we run that animation and we hit the point in the animation where it has that notify, it's going to run this function. And over here, we want to do a line trace by channel to detect where is the ground, where did we hit it, and do some other calculations to figure out what is the steepness of the surface. And to do so, we're gonna first try get pawn owner. And just in case if something goes wrong, they have a is valid by default. So just in case, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna do is valid. And then if it's valid, we're gonna proceed to the line trace by channel. Now we need start and end positions. And for the start, we're going to get from the pawn, we're going to get actor location. And that is going to be our starting position. Now for the end position, we're going to get the location of our character and do minus vector. And let's say something like 200. There we go. That's going to be the end position. Now for the testing purposes, you can now go ahead and change the draw debug type to for duration. And with this enabled, it's going to show you some red lines. And basically whenever we're going to run, you will see these red lines behind it with squares where it actually hits something. Now if you don't have the squares, if it doesn't hit the ground, then you might have to apply more minus in the z-axis so that the line is a bit longer. And once you are done with testing this, don't forget to change this back to none so you no longer see those. Good. Now once we have done our line trace, we want to do an if from the return value to see if we actually have hit something. And also from the out hit, we can actually get the surface type, and this way it is going to return us which physics material it actually hit. So from here we can do a switch, and as you can see now on true, we proceed to the switch and it will return us all the possible physics material, physics surfaces that we might have. Good. Now we also want to break our out hit because this is going to tell us where the feet touched the ground so we can play the sound at the impact points and all that stuff. And first let's set up the regular ones, so the painted painted pieces. So over here, what I actually want to do is create an array, some arrays for my sounds to be played, so it's a little bit easier, so I don't have to do a lot of switches. So I will do a new variable, and I'm going to call this grass sounds. And I know that my sounds are sound wave, but you can hover over your sounds and it's going to tell you what it is next to its name at the very top. So mine are sound wave. You might have sound cues or something different, and basically change the variable type to the format of your sounds. So I have sound wave, and I'm going to make an array out of this so I can store multiple different sounds. Now also I'm going to have the concrete sounds and the wood sounds. And once that is done, we can actually now populate our array. So I'm going to add 3 entries in this and do grass 1, grass 2, grass 3, and so forth. Now you can actually use only one sound, but by adding multiple sounds, this is going to give a little bit of a better effect. So I'm going to be using multiple different sounds and randomly picking one of them, therefore creating some better effects. So concrete is done. Now we also need the wood one. So we're going to have wood 1, wood 2, and wood number 3. That's not 3, that is 3. There we go. And now from our grass, concrete, and wood outputs, we can do play sound at location. And for the sound, I'm actually going to get the, so this, since this is grass, I'm going to get the grass sound, and I'm going to do random array item and plug that into the sound. And this way it is going to just grab a random sound, one of, well, at least one of these randomly, and it's going to play it. And I'm going to copy these 3 times for every single one of my layers. So I'm going to have concrete and wood and replace the arrays. So I'm going to have concrete in the middle and wood at the bottom. Now also we need to provide the location, which is going to be the impact point, like so. So we're going to do this and this. Good. So we have our sounds ready to play. Technically, we can go ahead and test this out just to make sure it actually does work. So if we would just paint our layers on, so we have our automatic one, and just let's paint some different ones. So we have the wood. So let's say we paint some wood over here. Then we paint some concrete over here. And we paint some grass over here. Let's wait for it to be done compiling, and let's test this out. Hit play. So now sound over here because this is the automatic one, and we have our wood, we have our concrete, and we have our grass. Good. Now let's set up the automatic one. Now for the auto one, we want to do some calculations. We want to figure out the steepness of our surface, and then based on the steepness, well, we're going to know which sounds we actually do need to play. Now for this, we can use our impact normal, which should technically return us values from -1 up until 1 based on the steepness, and we can run a dot product on this one. Now, I'm not the greatest at math, so I'm not really going to be able to explain what exactly this does, because I personally myself don't know what exactly this thing does. But what I do know is that if we grab our impact normal, do a dot product on this with values of 0, 0, 1, and then from the float value, if we do a cosinus degree, this is going to return us the steepness of the surface in degrees, and that is exactly what we need in order to figure out which sounds we want to play. So right now I'm going to provide some random values, and we're going to figure out what values we actually need, because I'm not exactly sure for this specific material what exact values I need. So I'm going to drag from the float, and I'm going to check if this float is bigger than let's say 25. And also I'm going to drag from it once more, and I'm going to check if it's smaller or equal to, let's say, 15. And these are just random values. We're going to change those in a second, and I'm going to show you how we can actually figure out what exactly we need. So from the Boolean values, we want to do a select int, and we want to do this from both of these. We want to do a select int. And now basically what this will do is, well, it's going to check if the degrees are bigger than 25, and if it's true, then it's going to return us a value, which is going to be 2. If it's not bigger, then it's going to return us 1. 2 is going to be our wood, because that is the material being used for the more steeper areas. Then 1 is going to be the ones that are not as steep, and 0 is going to be at the very top. So we're going to have 2 at A, 1 at B, and then the return value will go into the B, because here we check if it's smaller than 15, so whether this is the flat surface, and if that is true, if it's going to be smaller than 15, it's going to return us 0. Otherwise, well, it's going to return us one of these two. Now from this return value we can do a switch, not that, we want to do a switch on int, and we want to connect this one to the switch on our auto layer, like so. And now from here we can add 3 outputs, since we have 3 possibilities, and then we can play the different sounds again. So I'm actually just going to copy these nodes, paste them over here, and we could do some reroutes as well technically. So let's just bring this, delete this, and let's see what kind of a cool rerouting thing we can come up with to make this look somewhat decent. And it's going to look ugly either way. So 0 is going to be the flat one, so the grass one, so the 0 is going to go into the grass. 1 is going to be in between, so that's going to be our concrete, and 2 is going to be the steepest one, which is going to be our wood. Now technically you could just, like I said, just copy and paste this, and actually maybe that way it's going to look a little bit better. This is a bit of a messy one. And let me just do that. So we're going to do this, and we have the auto layer, and then we can do grass, concrete, wood, and connect the location. A little bit of a mess, but this way I think it's a little bit better for the visibility of the nodes. There we go. So that's pretty much it. Now we got to figure out how to detect the areas. So from the auto layer, actually before we do the switch, I'm going to do a print string, and I'm going to print out some values, and the value is actually going to be the degrees of the steepness, like so. And now it's going to tell me the steepness of the area, and this way I can actually figure out what numbers I actually need to provide in here. So let's go and hit play on this, and now on the flat surface, where is the auto material, it's going to print out 0 because it's completely flat, and it should tell us, it should play us the correct sound. Now if we run up the hill, as you can see, it is the wrong sound. So what we want to do is first we want to run on the edge to figure out the area. So let's look at the values. So you can see it's 17, 18, 17, 18, 15. So something like 16 seems to be pretty good. The 15 is not enough, so maybe like 17 would be pretty good to swap out the sounds. So let's do that. So let's do over here, let's do 17. So this way it might be a little bit better. And there we go. And that's very steep instantly, but over here seems to be pretty on spot. Now we need to figure out the top one, because this one is very incorrect. And actually we can test this a little bit better on the top here as well. Yeah, this seems to be good for the grass to the concrete. Now we need to figure out this one. So we should again run on the edge of this. And this one says something like 34, 35. So I'm feeling like 35 seems to be a very, very good spot for this. So let's try this out. So at the top, instead of 25, let's have 35. And let's see how that works then. So maybe a little less then. Maybe like 34 instead. Or 36 rather, so we need a little higher. So yeah, so maybe like 36 or maybe even 37 would be the best case in this specific situation. So you will have to experiment with these values. You can print them out. Once you are done, just remove those nodes and reconnect the auto back to the switch so it doesn't print those things out anymore. And there we go. So now we have different sounds on a automatic material based on the steepness and based on the blended material. And that's going to be it for today's video. So hope you enjoyed it, hope you liked it, hope you learned something new, and if you did, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, all that good stuff. Feel free to join my Discord, and I see you in the next one.